Have you ever wondered why the pain you hide seems to find its way back to you through faces, through lovers, through the silence you try so hard to maintain? Every wound she buried beneath composure became a voice in the dark, whispering her name, demanding to be seen. For the woman who does not face her shadow does not escape it. She becomes it. There was a time when she thought healing meant forgetting, that to rise above the ache was to erase its memory. But the soul has a longer memory than the mind, and what it suppresses, it later recreates. That is the quiet law of the psyche. What you deny inwardly, you attract outwardly. Her rejection of pain summoned mirrors that showed her exactly what she refused to feel. The men who left were only carrying the echoes of her own abandonment. The criticism she feared was the same voice that lived within her chest. The masculine wound fears rejection, the loss of conquest, the failure of control. But the feminine wound fears abandonment, the terror of being unseen, unheard, unloved. And in that fear she learns to perform. She becomes agreeable, soft, apologetic for her power. She learns to smile even when her body screams no. She learns to nurture even those who drain her life force because she was told that love is sacrifice. Yet beneath that conditioning lies another force, the ancient feminine instinct that refuses to die. The one Jung called the shadow, the repressed life of the soul, filled with instinct, rage, sensuality, and untamed knowing. When the woman begins to meet that shadow, something in her shifts. The pleasing softens into presence. The compliance burns into clarity. She begins to feel the weight of her own boundaries like armor forged from the molten truth of self-respect. The archetype that rises from that awakening is the witch, not the storybook villain, but the one who remembers that creation and destruction are the same current. The witch is not evil, she is whole. She does not chase affection, she conjures connection. Her silence is not absence, it is spell work. She no longer explains herself because she understands that what vibrates in truth does not beg to be believed. There is a scene that lives in the memory of every awakening woman. A man mocks her softness, expecting her to laugh it off, to remain pliant. But this time she doesn't smile. She meets his eyes and lets the silence fall heavy. He shifts, confused, suddenly aware that her stillness has weight. In that moment, she is no longer the reflection of his power, she is the mirror that reveals it was never his to begin with. That is the moment she meets her shadow, and instead of collapsing into it, she claims it. What he feels then is not her rejection, but her return. She has reclaimed the part of herself that once needed him to see her. And when a woman no longer seeks validation from the external, the masculine instinct cannot dominate her. It must evolve to meet her. The man who is unready will call her cold. The man who is awake will call her sacred. In the mythology of the psyche, the witch burns because she threatens the world built on denial. Her power is the power of seeing, to see through illusion, through performance, through the ego's desperate attempt to control perception. The witch within you is the part that dares to tell the truth even when it costs you love. She is the keeper of your intuition, your boundaries, your sacred anger. She is the one who says, enough. But facing her is terrifying, because to face her is to admit that you have betrayed yourself, that you've handed your worth to others and begged them to define it, that your silence was not strength, it was fear. Yet, paradoxically, that admission is liberation. Because once you see the shadow, it can no longer rule you. Once you feel the wound fully, it begins to transform. You were never meant to be pleasing. You were meant to be whole. And wholeness is not the absence of darkness, it is the integration of it. Sit in silence tonight. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence that listens. Feel the ache beneath your calm. Name it. Let it speak. Let it cry. Then let it rest in your arms as the mother you always needed. Because that is individuation, the marriage of what you've denied and what you've displayed. The feminine becomes sovereign when she no longer seeks safety outside herself, when she can stand between her shadow and her light and say, both are me. She is no longer the girl who hides her wounds. She is the woman who walks with them, unashamed. And every step she takes from that place of ownership is magic, because she has learned the secret. The shadow was never her enemy. It was the doorway to her becoming. She begins to feel it first as unease, a trembling under the surface of her calm like water pressed beneath ice. It isn't pain exactly, it's memory returning in disguise. The moment she silenced herself, the words she swallowed to keep the peace, the love she begged for through. Smallness. They all rise together like ghosts summoned not by vengeance but by longing. They want what she wants to be acknowledged. Every woman meets this moment differently, some through heartbreak, some through isolation, some through a sudden clarity that the life she built is too small for her soul. It is not punishment, it is initiation. The beginning of individuation, the path Jung described as the sacred confrontation between ego and shadow. The ego clings to comfort, the shadow drags her toward truth. Between them she stands trembling, half human, half myth. The man fears losing power, the woman fears losing connection, and so he controls while she conforms. It is the oldest dance on earth, yet beneath their conflict lies the same wound, the fear of being unworthy without the other's validation. This is why projection becomes the first language of love. She sees his potential instead of his pattern. He sees her nurturing instead of her boundaries. They fall in love not with each other, but with their unhealed parts reflected back. She begins to realize that every man she tried to save was an echo of her own neglected soul, that the tenderness she poured outward was the same tenderness she denied herself, that her obsession with being chosen was her refusal to choose herself first. This is the feminine's descent into shadow, the recognition that love given without self-respect is self-erasure disguised as devotion. In myth, Persephone is not stolen into the underworld, she is called there. Her descent is not tragedy, it is transformation. The same is true for the woman awakening now. She is not being punished by heartbreak. She is being initiated by it. The underworld she fears, the loneliness, the silence, the dark nights of unanswerable questions, is the very womb of her rebirth. The witch archetype guides her here, not as a cruel force but as the keeper of thresholds. She teaches her that rejection is redirection, that endings are incantations. Every no spoken with trembling lips is a spell cast in her own favor. Every boundary is a summoning of respect. Every withdrawal from chaos is a homecoming to clarity. Imagine her in the mirror days after a man's silence has replaced his affection. The mind wants to text, to reach, to explain, but she stops, she breathes. She looks into her own eyes and feels the ache move through her chest like smoke rising from a ritual fire. In that pause, she senses a different presence. Not him, her. The part of her that waited, watching through every abandonment. The part that never left. She begins to speak softly to that presence. Not in words, but in awareness. You are safe now. You don't have to beg, you don't have to chase, you don't have to prove. And in that moment of inward attention, she performs the most radical act of love, to reparent the forgotten self. That is shadow work in its purest form, to become conscious of what was once rejected and hold it without judgment. The witch teaches that integration requires solitude, not loneliness but solitude, the space where identity dissolves and essence returns. The silence becomes a crucible, the pain becomes purification, the stillness becomes power. This is why she no longer fears being alone. She recognizes it as the soil from which her sovereignty grows. To the woman listening now, every time you silence your intuition, you strengthen your shadow. Every time you betray your boundary, you teach your psyche that love costs your truth. But when you begin to honor your inner voice, when you stop chasing and start choosing, you become magnetic, not because you seek attention, but because you emanate authenticity. The world feels your coherence and responds. This is individuation in motion, the alchemy of opposites. The feminine, once fragmented, begins to unify. The mother and the lover, the nurturer and the hunter, the innocent and the witch. She no longer fights her contradictions, she weaves them. Her soul ceases to plead and begins to command, not through dominance but through resonance. And the men who approach her now sense something different. They feel her presence like a mirror that cannot be deceived. Some will flee, unable to meet their own reflection. Others will stay, drawn not to her beauty, but to her stillness, to the mystery of a woman who needs nothing yet embodies everything. Sit with this truth tonight. The love you seek is not elsewhere. It begins in the place you've avoided most, your own depth. Do not fear the descent. The woman who meets her darkness rises with the light of her own fire. There comes a stage when she no longer asks, "Why did he leave?" or "Why did they not see me?" Instead, she begins to whisper a more dangerous question. What part of me abandoned me first? That question opens the gate no one tells her about, the inner threshold between victimhood and awakening. Every unhealed woman carries within her a buried scream. It is not anger at men, nor hatred of love. It is grief, the grief of self-betrayal, the grief of saying yes when her soul meant no, the grief of performing femininity as a survival mechanism, and that grief, once heard, becomes sacred fuel. The witch inside her rises not from rebellion but remembrance. She recalls a time before conditioning, before the collective taming of the feminine spirit. She remembers that her intuition once spoke louder than her fear, that her body once moved with its own wisdom, that her voice once summoned creation. And now, she begins the journey back to that remembrance. This return is not linear. It moves like the moon, waxing, waning, vanishing, returning. Some days she radiates clarity, other days she collapses into confusion. But even her confusion is holy because it means the false self is dissolving. Individuation is not becoming perfect, it is becoming real. She sees now how the masculine wound sought dominance not out of cruelty but fear. The fear of losing control, the terror of insignificance, the hunger to be seen as enough. And she sees how her feminine wound answered that fear with surrender, overgiving, over-explaining, over-loving. Together they formed a pact of mutual blindness, each mirroring the other's unconscious. But awakening demands rupture, so she breaks the pattern not by revenge, not by withdrawal, but by integration. She faces the masculine within herself, the inner animus, the force of direction and discernment she once projected outward. And she calls it home. She says, "I no longer need to seek protection in another. I am the guardian of my own boundaries. I am both the temple and the fire within it." This is the secret of sacred balance, the marriage of inner masculine and feminine. When she unites them, her outer relationships change. The needy become distant, the controlling lose their grip, and those who meet her wholeness arrive in quiet recognition, because energy no longer seeks what it already contains. There is a moment late in her transformation when she walks into a room and feels the difference. She no longer bends her light to fit. She no longer shrinks to avoid envy or inflates to earn praise. Her aura becomes steady, unreactive. People sense it. Some are drawn. Others are unsettled. That is how sovereignty feels. It disturbs what feeds on dependency. The witch watches, amused. She knows that true magic is not in spells or rituals, but in frequency. The aligned feminine alters the atmosphere simply by existing. Her silence speaks. Her absence educates. Her gaze invites truth to reveal itself. She does not need to persuade or seduce. Her energy does the talking. But make no mistake, the path to such presence is paid for in pain. Shadow work strips away illusions layer by layer until only essence remains. She confronts her envy, her jealousy, her resentment, her control. She admits that her need for validation was manipulation in disguise, that her caretaking often hid a fear of abandonment, that her idealization of love was avoidance of loneliness. And yet, she forgives herself, not with sentimentality but with depth. She understands that every distortion was a cry for safety. Forgiveness becomes the final alchemy, not forgiveness of those who hurt her, but forgiveness of the self who stayed, because she now sees what she could not see then, that every compromise, every silence, every overextension was an attempt to survive. And survival is not weakness. It is proof of her enduring will. Now she chooses differently. She loves differently. She speaks differently. When a man approaches her, she no longer evaluates his desire, she feels his depth. When someone disrespects her boundary, she does not argue, she withdraws. Her power is quiet, surgical. She cuts not to wound, but to reveal. To you, the listener, begin to notice the moments you betray yourself. Not to judge, but to witness. Awareness is correction. Each time you choose truth over comfort, your shadow integrates. Each time you honor your intuition, your light strengthens. Sit in your discomfort and call it teacher. Because the feminine soul, once reclaimed, does not roar, it hums. It moves through life like water through stone, soft yet unstoppable. The witch has returned, but this time she is not feared. She is revered within you. There is a silence that arrives after transformation. It is not empty, it is sovereign. The world mistakes it for detachment, but it is something deeper. It is the peace of a woman who no longer performs her worth. The noise of seeking has stopped. The need to be understood dissolves. What remains is presence, unapologetic, unwavering, complete. In this stillness, she no longer identifies with her past self, the one who chased approval like oxygen. That version of her was not false, she was formative. She was the bridge between unconscious pain and conscious power. The woman she is now honors her but does not live as her. The cocoon was never the mistake, it was the rite of passage. This is the essence of individuation, to hold all versions of the self without fragmentation. The maiden who loved too much, the mother who overgave, the witch who burned for her truth, the queen who now rules through discernment. They are not rivals, they are chapters of one consciousness learning to remember its own wholeness. The queen within her emerges quietly. She is not crowned by others, she crowns herself. Her throne is not made of gold but of boundaries. Her crown is forged from integrity. Her power does not shout, it emanates. The queen archetype is the final form of the integrated feminine, rooted, receptive, radiant. She leads not through control but coherence. She knows that real authority begins with self-governance. Watch her in a moment of temptation. A man tries to provoke her, to test her softness, to draw her into the old game of reaction. But she does not rise to it, she breathes. Her eyes stay calm. She knows that silence when conscious is command. In that pause, the energy returns to her. The spell breaks. She does not punish. She simply remains unmoved. That is her new language, composure. Not the performance of indifference, but the embodiment of self-trust. This is what unnerves the unhealed masculine. Her peace cannot be manipulated. Her validation cannot be bought. Her attention is no longer a default gift. It is earned through presence. For centuries, women were taught to equate love with endurance, to carry pain as proof of loyalty. But now she understands a higher truth. Love that demands the death of self is not love, it is bondage. The sacred feminine loves deeply but never at the cost of her essence. She gives without depletion. She receives without guilt. She walks away without bitterness. In this stage of individuation, her power no longer needs an audience. The queen moves differently. She values solitude over company that dulls her intuition. She listens to her inner world more than she explains it to others. She finds beauty not in validation, but in congruence, when her words, actions, and emotions align as one unbroken stream. And something extraordinary happens. Her reality begins to mirror her coherence. Opportunities arrive with less struggle. People respect her boundaries instinctively. The chaos that once defined her relationships fades, replaced by simplicity. Because the outer world must reorganize to match the frequency of her inner truth. The masculine, too, feels the shift. He stands before her uncertain. He senses that this is not the woman he once knew. She does not plead, persuade, or perform. She listens, but she is not waiting. Her silence tests the integrity of his presence. Her energy calls forth his maturity. The boy who sought validation feels exposed. The man who seeks union feels seen. And so the sacred polarity restores itself. The awakened feminine does not dominate the masculine, she refines him. Her sovereignty invites his strength to awaken. Her boundaries birth his respect. Her truth activates his purpose. Together they rise, not as halves seeking completion, but as wholes recognizing resonance. To the woman listening now, remember, every wound was a compass. Every heartbreak was a messenger. Every silence you endured taught you the language of your own soul. The pain was never punishment, it was initiation. The shadow you feared was never trying to destroy you, it was trying to introduce you to yourself. Sit with that tonight. Let it sink into the body. Breathe into the parts of you that still ache to be chosen. And then whisper to them, I choose you now. I choose the part that doubted, the part that tried too hard, the part that still trembles. I choose you. Because that is the final act of power, not dominance, not detachment, but devotion. To stand fully in the center of one's being and claim with quiet certainty, I am whole. I am the one I was waiting for. When she reaches the end of her descent, she realizes it was never an end at all. It was a spiral. The same lessons return, but each time she meets them from a higher plane, with softer eyes and steadier hands. She no longer resists the cycles. She understands that rebirth is not a single moment of awakening, but a rhythm of remembering. Every loss, every silence, every letting go has been an initiation into deeper wholeness. The witch within her now walks beside the queen. Together they form the alchemical circle, power and peace, instinct and order, shadow and light. The parts of her that once warred against each other now dance. Her darkness no longer threatens her, it informs her. Her softness no longer feels like weakness, it becomes her secret weapon. The woman who once apologized for her intensity now recognizes it as sacred fire. The world begins to shift around her in subtle ways. The same people who once drained her begin to fade, not through conflict, but through vibration. The energy of self-betrayal can no longer inhabit the same field as sovereignty. New faces appear, those who mirror her growth rather than her wounds. Conversations deepen, solitude sweetens. Even her silence feels alive, like the hum of an unseen current. She looks back on her past and feels no hatred, only gratitude wrapped in melancholy. The men who couldn't stay taught her self-respect. The friends who disappeared taught her discernment. The chaos she endured taught her calm. She sees that nothing was wasted. The shadow did not destroy her, it sculpted her. It was the forge through which her soul was tempered into strength. This is the essence of individuation, the realization that the psyche is not broken but self-organizing, that every part, even the most painful, serves the purpose of integration. The woman who accepts this becomes free from victimhood. She no longer asks life to be easy. She asks only that it be true. And because she now lives in truth, the universe no longer needs to teach her through suffering. Lessons arrive gently, through intuition rather than crisis. Her aura changes again. There is a depth to her now that words cannot reach. People feel her before she speaks. Her gaze carries the weight of having walked through fire and chosen compassion. Her silence commands reverence. She no longer seeks to be understood, yet she is understood by those who can see. She has become her own archetype, part queen, part witch, part oracle. When a man meets her now, he senses both invitation and challenge. She is open but not available to the uninitiated. She does not seduce, she summons. She does not need to prove her value because her energy speaks its own language. He feels her awareness like light moving through his blind spots. If he can stand in that illumination, he evolves. If he cannot, he fades. She blesses both outcomes. The sacred feminine has learned the art of detachment, not from coldness but from completion. Detachment in its pure form is not distance. It is freedom from the illusion that love must bind. True love, she understands now, does not demand possession. It invites evolution. To love and let go is no longer her heartbreak. It is her mastery. The shadow she once feared has become her ally. When pain returns, she listens. When jealousy stirs, she breathes. When fear whispers, she smiles. Every emotion is a messenger, not a threat. She no longer rejects any part of herself, for she knows that even the darkest corners of her being are made of the same divine material as her light. So she lives differently, With less noise, less striving, less need to be seen, her life becomes ceremony. She moves through her days as though each moment were a prayer in motion. She tends to her body like a temple. She speaks only what is essential. She chooses rest over rush, depth over display, substance over spectacle. And in this quiet sovereignty, she finally understands what power truly is. It is not domination. It is not rebellion. It is inner alignment so pure that nothing external can disrupt it. The woman who once feared abandonment now embodies presence so complete that loss itself becomes illusion. If you listen closely, you will feel her energy echo through your own. She is not a myth or an idea. She is you, unmasked, integrated, awake. The process you resist is the very process that will return you to her. Tonight, close your eyes and remember the one who waited beneath all your masks, the one who never left, the one who watched through every heartbreak, every silence, every rebirth. She is your shadow and your light, your past and your potential, your wound and your wisdom. Embrace her. She has always been the way home. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.